Chapter 17. Ripley waited until Angie was inside the hatchway, then backed in herself, but the door remained open. "Something's wrong," said the botanist. "No," said Ripley. "Nothing's wrong. The door won't close if someone's approaching it." Right on cue, Crack emerged from the jungle and joined Ripley in the hatchway. Angie stared at him, open-mouthed. "He's been watching our backs," Ripley explained. "And I've been watching his. It works better that way." "If you say so," said Angie. Still training her burner on the jungle beyond the hatch, Ripley waited for the doors to slide closed. A moment later, they began to cooperate. Ripley remained alert, her eyes on the deepest pockets of shadow, until the doors had closed completely. Then, without a moment's hesitation, she turned and headed for the set at the far end of the hatchway. The Betty wasn't in the next habitat, but the one after that. They still had a way to go. However, they had left a dome where the aliens were engaged in a feeding frenzy. With some luck, they would remain there, hunting for the prey they had already exhausted. Long enough for Ripley and her companions to reach their objective. And when was luck ever not on our side? She thought ironically, taking out her comm unit to contact Call. But there was no answer. That meant Call either had her hands full or had already been destroyed. Ripley chose to believe the latter. Replacing her comm unit in her pocket, she got a fresh grip on her shock rifle. Then she headed for the far set of doors and the dome beyond them. As Vriess sat by the Betty's open bay door and peered down into the dome, he cursed himself for what had to be the 30th time. Not that what had happened was any of his fault. Rama was supposed to have been standing watch in the cargo bay, but when Vriess came to take his place, Rama was nowhere to be seen. Nowhere on the ship, in fact, which meant he had gone down the chain for some reason. Before long, it became apparent that Simone was gone as well. More than likely, it seemed to Vriess, one of the two had fallen or descended into the colony dome, and the other one had followed. But there was no way of knowing who went first, or that it had happened that way at all. Vriess, being chair-bound, was hardly in a position to go down after them, and Bolero, the only real pilot in the group, was too essential to the rescue plan to put at risk. So all they had been able to do was wait and worry. That is, until two of the colonists, Cody and Gogolak, crawled into the bay, exhausted from their climb but otherwise whole. Apparently, Call had taken them in a ground vehicle to the backup supply bay, only to discover it had been sabotaged since Ripley and Jonah had checked it out. So instead, Call had driven the colonists back to the punctured dome, deposited them at the bottom of the chain, and waited till they were up. Then she had gone off to find Ripley and Crack, as well as any of the other colonists who might have survived. Of course, if Cody's account of their encounter with the aliens was accurate, there wouldn't be many survivors. But Vriess would stay there anyway, waiting for a sign that someone was coming back. So when he got one, he would be ready. Behind him, the door to the cargo bay opened and Gogolak appeared. "Mind if I join you?" she asked. Vriess shrugged. "Suit yourself." Standing beside him with her arms folded across her chest, the botanist gazed at the habitat below. "I've never seen it from up here. It looks so peaceful." "Looks that way," Vriess agreed. Gogolak turned to him. "If not for you people, we would all have been killed." "Or worse," he noted silently. That's my way of saying thank you, she told him. But what I can't figure out is why you do this. Vriess smiled a grim smile, maintaining his scrutiny of the dome. For her, he said. For Ripley, you mean? Uh-huh. And also the perks. You haven't lived till you've had a swig of Jonah's moonshine. I'm serious, said Gogolak. So am I, said Vriess. Ripley had led Crack and Angie halfway across Dome 2 when she caught a whiff of something, or more accurately, someone. Nearby. But where? A few meters to her left, under a tangle of raised roots. In the encroaching darkness, she had to concentrate to see it shifting, turning. Crack, she said softly. The blond man's eyes slid in her direction. To my left. Be ready. He didn't say anything, but she knew she could count on him. Dropping her hand to the trigger of her shock rifle, she made sure he wasn't the only one. Come on, she thought. Make a move. I dare you. It accepted her dare. But instead of coming for her, it bolted in the opposite direction, something she would never have expected of an alien. Ripley wasn't accustomed to this breed. She didn't know how they behaved in a given set of circumstances. But if they were at all related to the aliens she knew, it would go against their grain to run from an encounter. Following her instincts, Ripley gave pursuit. Without looking, she knew Crack would be right behind her. Ignoring the branches that whipped at her as she went by, she closed the gap between her and the thing running from her, and before long she caught up to it. But it wasn't an alien. It was neither big enough nor dark enough, and it smelled wrong. Like a human, but not one of the colonists. Finally, exhausted, it slumped against a tree. Then it turned to her, revealing itself. Simone, she thought. He was dirty and pale and scared-looking, and he had urinated in his pants. My God, he said, his voice hoarse and strained. It's you. I thought it was one of the... He couldn't even bring himself to name them. Who is he? Angie asked. Ripley didn't answer. She was too busy adjusting to the fact of Simone's presence there and what it might mean. What are you doing here? She asked the reporter. I wanted to see you, he said. In action, I mean. I thought... He looked as if he were going to cry. I thought it would make for a better story. His eyes told her there was more. You saw something. What? Simone looked down at the ground. Rama. What about him? He followed me. The reporter's voice was little more than a whisper. But before he could get to the ground, one of the aliens... Finally, tears fell. One of them jumped him. Ripley's teeth ground together. Rama. He died going after you. Is that what you're saying? Simone looked miserable. I didn't expect him to follow me down. I thought I'd gotten away without anyone seeing me. Feeling a surge of dark, sliding anger, Ripley leaned closer to him until her face was a centimeter from his. "Jonah was right," she said between clenched teeth. "I should have let him shove you out the waste hole. Hell, I should have done it myself." Simone stared at her, wide-eyed. I... Ripley didn't want to hear what he had to say. Turning away from him, she resumed her passage through the swiftly darkening jungle. If she was going to get ambushed by one of the aliens, it wouldn't be because of a distraction as insignificant as Simone. She had taken him in, protected him, because he gave her a link, however tenuous, to Amanda. She had allowed the guilt she felt pass down from the original Ripley to cloud her judgment, and Rama had paid the price. But she wouldn't be weak anymore. As the others fell in line behind her, Simone last of all, Ripley focused on getting them to the Betty. For now, that was all she would allow herself to think about. As Simone trailed Ripley through the benighted environs of Dome 3, he kept feeling the scrutiny of the little botanist. But every time he turned to her, her attention was focused elsewhere. Well, he thought, screw her. If she'd been through what I've been through, she would have pissed her pants too. He recalled the dark, angular shapes that had harried him, chasing him through the jungle. He remembered the way they had brushed against the roots of his hiding place, their teeth clicking with anticipation. He recalled how his insides had frozen at the nearness of them. Just screw her, and screw Ripley too. Her words had bitten deeply, more deeply than Simone cared to admit. I should have let him shove you out the waste hole. Hell, I should have done it myself. He would show her how it felt to be terrified. First chance he got, he would show her. Then she would be sorry for what she had said to him. Screw them all. Seeing the first stars appear in the gaps above her, Ripley swore softly to herself. She had hoped to avoid traveling in the dark, but it wasn't working out that way. Soon starlight was the only light they would have. It can't be much farther, Angie breathed. But then she had never traversed the domes at night. She wasn't necessarily a reliable judge of such things. To Ripley, it felt as if they still had a considerable trek ahead of them before they reached the Betty. And with all the roots and rocks they had to avoid, it would probably take even longer than mere distance would suggest. Unfortunately, every moment they were out in the open was another chance for an alien to catch up with them. Just as Ripley thought that, she heard a sound off to her right. Swiveling her burner in that direction, she listened, but didn't hear anything more. For just a moment, she relaxed, and that moment was her undoing, as something hard and immensely heavy dropped on her from above, driving her inexorably to the ground. God damn it! She snapped, angry at herself for not detecting the thing before it was too late. In a narrow slash of starlight, she could see her attacker, its gargantuan claws pinning her down, its long blue-black head poised above her like the business end of a hammer. Sizing me up, she thought. Ripley would have blasted it with her shock rifle if she'd had the option, but the impact had knocked the burner out of her hands, and she didn't know where it had fallen. She also didn't know what had happened to her companions, but she could guess. She had ordered Crack to save Angie if they were attacked. He had too much esteem for her to do otherwise. So Ripley was utterly and terribly alone. The alien's head tilted slightly to the side, a torrent of saliva dripping from its mouth on her face and chest. She was in its possession, its plaything, its meat. Ripley struggled to free herself, but to no avail. The thing was too heavy, too strong, too eager to partake of her blood. Opening its maw, it revealed its inner teeth. They gleamed as they emerged into the starlight, sharp and hungry and poised to tear Ripley's throat out. Death was so close she could almost feel it. There was a moment, in fact, when she was sure it had already happened. But the alien hesitated. "I'm not like the others," Ripley thought. She and the alien shared several rungs worth of DNA. They were family. But it wasn't like the situation on the Auriga. There, Ripley had ultimately been embraced by the aliens because she had carried their queen in her chest cavity. Here, they were too distantly related for it to make a difference. "It'll kill me, DNA or no DNA." Pulling its head back, it prepared to do just that. Which was why Ripley slugged the alien as hard as she could, causing it to recoil in surprise for a moment. But a moment was all she could buy herself. With a scream of rage and frustration, the thing went for her with its inner teeth. Twisting in its grasp, she saw it snap at the ground instead of her face. Ultimately, she knew the encounter could end only one way, with her bloody, agonizing death. It wasn't the way she had planned it, but she would struggle as long as she was able, giving the others a better chance to get away. Ripley was still thinking that when something came barreling into the alien's flank, rocking it sideways, giving her the opening she needed to extract herself. Rolling out from under her adversary, she caught sight of her burner, and grabbed it, and fired, just as the alien sent someone flying with a slash of its long black claw. Sent reeling by Ripley's energy discharge, the creature came up hard against a tree trunk, hard enough to shake leaves from the branches above it. But it was far from subdued, as it proved a moment later by lurching forward, burn or no burn. Ripley saw the alien reaching for her through the crackle of blue-white energy, its legs working, its inner jaw extending greedily in her direction. Her burner wasn't stopping it. She was only slowing it down, prolonging the inevitable. Then a second lance of energy joined the first, throwing the alien off balance again. With a shriek of rage, it turned and went after the second source. But that left its flank open to Ripley. Moving closer, she poured everything she had at the thing, and eventually it fell under the weight of the combined barrage. Writhing and spasming, it succumbed. But not until its flesh was thoroughly charred and an oily black plume was rising from it. Ripley turned to Crack, the one who had come to her aid, and signaled for him to stand watch. Then she went to the body she had seen fly through the air. It was lying against a bush, awash in blood, a pile of something sitting beside it. Only when Ripley got closer could she identify the pile as the victim's guts, torn from their rightful cavity. Looking up, she saw freckles under the blood and a thatch of red hair. Simone. His eyes were open and staring, and for a moment Ripley thought he was dead. Then she saw his lips flutter. Moving to his side, she knelt and asked what he had said. "Not a coward," he breathed. Blood bubbled up over his lips. Not a damned... He groaned from the depths of him. A damned coward. Because he had intervened on her behalf and saved her life. And it was true that she would have died without Simone's help. But people couldn't preserve other people's lives as much as they liked to think they could. In the end, they'll all be lost, one way or the other. No exceptions. She had learned that the hard way over the long, dark years. But like Simone, she was fool enough to keep trying. "You're not a coward," she assured him, saying what he wanted to hear. "You're a goddamned hero." Through his pain, Simone took on a look of satisfaction. It was still there on his face when he went limp and his eyes rolled back in his head. Ripley looked back at Angie, who was standing behind her, staring at Simone. The botanist looked rooted to the spot. Getting to her feet, Ripley said, "Let's go, or we'll all be sitting somewhere with our guts hanging out." The words were barely out of her mouth before she heard the approach of something else, something ripping through the foliage to get to them. Wheeling, she trained her weapon in that direction and braced herself. But it wasn't an alien. It was a flivver, its headlights dark, with Call at the wheel and a grim-looking Jonah riding shotgun. Ripley swore softly. "About time you got here." Jonah pointed to Simone with his shock rifle. "Huh, what happened to him?" Ripley scowled. "He was a hero. What's the difference?" Jonah shrugged as Ripley climbed onto the flivver. "Just thought I'd ask." When they were underway, with everyone aboard, Call shot a glance back at Ripley. "The backup bay's on the blink now too. We're heading for the Betty." "So are we," said Ripley as they plunged headlong through the jungle. "So it works out." On hearing the hatch to her cockpit open, Bolero glanced over her shoulder and saw one of the botanists. Cody, she thought. "I hope you don't mind my coming up here," he said, "but I can't sit in the mess hall any longer, and it makes me dizzy to look down at the dome from that angle. Or set of angles, I guess you'd say." "Just as long as you clear out when I get the word we're leaving," she told him. The botanist said, "Fair enough," sat down beside her and considered her instrument panel. "You know," he said, "I wanted to be a pilot once. I even trained a little." "That's great," said Bolero, "but don't get the idea it's okay to touch anything. This is a delicate operation. One slip and we're screwed." "Don't worry," Cody said. "The last thing I want to do is make everything in that dome die a little faster." "You mean the plants?" she asked. "Obviously. There isn't much else there." "Funny," Bolero said. "If it were me, I'd be more concerned about my colleagues." "I am," said Cody, a flash of indignation in his eyes. "Who wouldn't be? But we're not going to be killing one of my colleagues, and we are going to be killing what's in the dome." "Yeah, but out of necessity," she reminded him. He frowned. "Listen, I know this isn't our priority, but is it possible there's another way? Something we can do to keep those trees from being sucked into space?" "Well, we could stay here," said Bolero, "like that boy with his finger in the dike. But that's not going to happen. The people who arranged this little party are going to be by at some point to see how it went, and we'll want to be long gone by then. Oh, it's a pity, said Cody. We put a lot into those plants. Losing them is like losing part of me. You know what's a real pity? Said Bolero. The fact that I'm going to have to ask you to leave my cockpit. He looked at her, surprised. Did I do something to offend you? You are creeping me out, said Bolero. That's offense enough. I can't afford to have someone up here who's not 100% on board with everything we're doing. So if I were you, I'd go bother Vriess. I'm sorry, said Cody. I didn't mean to. And before you get any ideas, she added, I can have a burner in my hand faster than you can think about jumping me. Holding his hands up in a petition for peace, the botanist got up from his seat. Oh, no need for that. I'm going, see? But before he could get anywhere, Vriess's voice filled the cockpit. Bolero! Ripley's through the hatch to my right. I can't tell how many she's got with her. That meant they would be shoving off in a few minutes, depending on how many colonists Ripley had to push up the chain. Bolero started activating the requisite systems, putting Cody aside. As it turned out, it was a mistake. And she had been wrong. She couldn't produce a burner faster than Cody could jump her. What's more, he was surprisingly strong. So much so that when he pulled her out of her seat, she shot up like a distress flare. Vriess! Bolero cried out over what she hoped was still a live comlink, and kicked Cody in the nuts. As far as she could tell, he didn't even feel it. And before she could try anything else, he slammed her into the nearest bulkhead, making her teeth rattle. Dazed, the taste of blood thick in her mouth, Bolero regained her bearings in time to see Cody doing something at her instrument panel. Somehow she picked herself up off the floor and leaped onto his back, but he kept on working her controls as if she wasn't there. Hearing a hiss behind her, the pilot glanced over her shoulder and saw Vriess sitting there with a projectile rifle in his hands. Their eyes met for a moment, acknowledging the fact that an errant shell would do to the cockpit what they intended to do to the dome, leave a hole that would suck all its air out into the void. But Bolero knew there was no better shot than Vriess. Dropping off the botanist's back, she hit the deck. Cody! Barked the little man. Cody didn't turn around. He just kept on doing what he was doing, leaving Vriess no choice. Lifting his rifle, Vriess pumped a shell into Cody's back. It had no visible effect. Cursing, Vriess plugged Cody with a second shell, this one a little higher up, and this time it spun the botanist around, making him clutch at his back as if he thought he could pluck out the projectile. Then something white and creamy flew out of his mouth, and he fell to the deck beside Bolero. But he didn't just lie there. He twitched and jerked, as if he were afflicted with a nervous condition. Ah, he's an android! Vriess spat out. Like Call, Bolero thought. It explained the way Cody had thrown her around, and why Vriess's first slug hadn't accomplished anything. The presence of an android among the colonists raised questions Bolero didn't have time to answer. If Ripley was going to reach the bay in a matter of minutes, Bolero had to finish bringing the necessary systems online, and address any delays Cody had created with his manipulations. By then, Gogolak had stuck her head into the cockpit. At the sight of Cody, her eyes went wide and round. He's... An android, said Bolero. We know. Dragging her battered body to its feet, she grabbed hold of Cody's armpits and swiveled him around until his head was facing Gogolak. Now get him out of here! Numbly, Gogolak bent to her task. As she dragged the android out of the cockpit, Vriess went with her to make sure Cody didn't give her any trouble. And also, of course, to make sure Gogolak didn't present any trouble of her own. And Bolero plopped herself down in front of her instruments, fighting through a haze to do what she had to do.